Hey everybody, we are here and back for an episode of LaRae Infinity Let's Talk Podcast Season 3, the ladies behind the mic. And as always, I'm saying thank you to every last one of my listeners, my guests, and I really can't believe we are already so far along in the season. We only have this episode and one more to go, but I'll tell you right now, here's the secret. So I feel like in my bones, there may be a bonus episode this season. 3 seasons later, I'm like, oh, bonus episode. And she's my soror, so of course, we're going to make it happen. Warning, in this show, there is cursing, adult conversation, and explicit language.
Hello, my name is Kira, and I am 40 years old. I am a passionate Pisces, and today I am here to tell all of my business, as you know I love to do. You're listening to LaRae Infinity Let's Talk Podcast, Season 3, Episode 11.
Yes, and I am LaGina, your host. And here we are for Ladies Behind the Mic. Okay, y'all, so I know and met Kira, like I don't know her, and I have not met her. But if you remember Jay from earlier in the season, Jay's Quick 3, Jay and I have known each other for years via our best friends, which is so crazy. And Kira knows Jay. And so you know how you do that thing, my homegirl knows my homegirl, we're all on podcasting, so we're all podcasting together. This is where we're at. But I really enjoy you. I enjoy your energy. I appreciate your interactions with Jay. And so that was enough for me to definitely want you on the show and just hear more about your journey. You're a very transparent person. So I appreciate you and who you are. And I appreciate even more when we were playing Let's Talk Fast. I said confident and you said sometimes. Mm-hmm. And that's what this show is about, is women telling their unapologetic stories the way they want to tell them, own time and own words. And it's not always easy to be unapologetic. And it's not always easy to admit that, this Black girl magic thing is not always 100% like, oh, we're perfect with strong and capes. And it's like, whatever, I cry in a corner. That's what happens. I cry in a corner. So welcome to the show.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here. Jay is my internet friend. When I started in podcasting, I was really searching for a community, and I don't know how I kind of stumbled into that universe, but she really embraced me and encouraged me a lot with my health, like walking and exercising and running and hiking. And it's just always welcoming to meet people through the internet that you can feel have a genuine care for you and are really rooting you on. So it speaks a lot to who she is, because she's made a space for me, and she didn't have to speak my name in a room of opportunity, but she chose to do that. So because of that, I'm grateful.
Okay. Women are often given rules that we are supposed to follow, and the things that we're supposed to do, and the sizes we're supposed to be. And there's all of these things. There's a whole big checklist and boxes we're supposed to be in. And it's crazy. But what I'm starting to see, what I've been seeing, what I've grown up seeing, is this celebration of our individuality, how we have chosen to be the woman that we are, whether it is left, right, up, down, or middle. And the Let's Talk podcast is all about celebrating that journey. And so I just want to do that with you and take a little hour and chop it up with you. So here we go. Let's just start right away with where did you grow up? Who are you? Where do you fall within your family?
Yes. So I grew up in Atlanta. So I am a Georgia peach. So cat's out the bag. I was actually born in Maryland, but all of my childhood recollection, when you think about grade school, all of that is Atlanta. So I classify myself as a Georgia peach. My mom is from Atlanta. My dad is from Nashville. My dad is a Marine. So, we moved around a little bit. I was in Tennessee for a while, but Atlanta is my home. My mom was married twice. My dad's been married 3 times. So we were always taught to have this blended family concept where there are no steps or halves. So with that being said, I am 7 out of 13 children. Books always came very easy to me. So my mom put me in private school. And I heard someone else talk about this on the show. I begged to go to public school. So I finally went to public school and I was acing it out there. And then finally I went to a magnet school in Atlanta. Jasmine Guy, Ruth Paul went there, North Atlanta High School, where I got kicked out. They said I had weed, but it was really oregano because I was putting on. It was like herbs in a bag, but this girl snitched on me and I got kicked out of North Atlanta in my 9th grade year. My mom was mad as hell. And I ended up having to transfer. I transferred to this other school called Avondale. It was a school of performing arts here in Atlanta. But after that, my world kind of just like crumbled. My mom got sick. She had a stroke, an aneurysm, and it was just a lot. So I was still like always a straight A student. And but around that time, like I was 15 years old, my mom had a stroke on a Friday night after Bible study. And I went to this overly religious, like, you know, the leaves of the trees for the healing of the nation. No shade to any type of religion or anything.
Yeah, no shade.
They did not take her to the hospital right away. And because of that, my world was turned upside down. So at 15 years old, my mom was an entrepreneur. She had her own hair salon. She went into a coma and I was left to run her business, make a decision about my 9-year-old brother at the time, communicate with my dad who lived in Maryland. I called him. My father immediately sprung into action. They trusted me enough to stay. So I ran my mother's business for a whole year at 15 while my mother was sick and ill. And after a while, I was still trying to find my way, didn't have guidance. The adults in my life were really being manipulative and greedy because my mother, again, being an entrepreneur, was kind of like the money person that kind of took care of everything. And I didn't understand the magnitude of that until she was sick and how had everyone kind of pulling at me. So I turned to the streets because although I grew up, my mom's like Christian, not like, you know, some people like they Christian, but at home don't be. No, we was Christians. You know, on Halloween's, I used to pass out Bible tracts, and people come to the door like trick or treats. I'm like, do you know Jesus? You know, like, you know, we were Christians. You know, like who wants to do that as a kid? So, but you know, you had to. So when all of this was happening, even when we growing up, my family lived in the projects, like the majority of them. So I knew the street. As they say, I was hood adjacent, right? So
we have to address hood adjacent because, you know, just like your podcast, worldwide, and we like to break stuff down. And I have to say a big shout out to my homegirls in South Africa. Thank you for sharing what's going on in South Africa with COVID, fucked up situations, especially since here in the United States, there's so many vaccinations floating around that people are taking for granted. So I just have to say, love to South Africa, and we want to tell them what hood adjacent is.
Okay, so hood adjacent is like you're not necessarily in low income or projects, right? You're not in the air quote ghetto, but where I live wasn't very far from it, and the majority of my family was hood / you know, in the projects. So in the summer, that's where I would spend my summers, hood adjacent, you know, and then on Sunday get dressed and go sing in the choir. Like when my mom got sick, the business kind of left. The adults were going like crazy or whatever, just really trying to get to the money. I went to, I guess, my comfort zone, which was the street and hood. So I got this boyfriend and he was a drug dealer, and my aunt kind of took over for me with the business, and I was in the street and I began to flunk out. And I remember distinctly, my sister would never, ever admit to this. My sister's 15 years older than me. I have a niece. We're the same age. We're 2 weeks apart. So my mom and my sister were pregnant at the same time. So although my sister is 15 years older than me, because she was basically raising her daughter, we, you know, her daughter and I, my niece and I are really close. I've never looked at my sister as a sister. It's always been like a authority figure until I became an adult. But my sister was on crack, right? So she had a really bad drug addiction. And the dude that I was dating, again, was a drug dealer. So how I would bribe my way out of the house and be able to do whatever it is I wanted to do. Either he would give her drugs or money. And one time, I don't know what it is, but I was like, no, fuck that. No, I'm not doing that or whatever, and left anyway. She called my dad and basically was telling my dad all the fucked up shit that I was doing. And he planned to come down, like ambush me to come and get me from Georgia and take me to Maryland. And I'm like, I don't know what happened. I didn't go to school. I was drunk or something, high, didn't go, I was at the house. And my sister was like, I'm going to go to the store, knowing my dad was on his way. And my dad came. It was like, get your stuff. He had notified my job with like a 2 weeks notice, told them not to tell me, like had everything set in motion. Everybody knew but me. And my sister to this day will not admit, even though everyone else involved with it have said that she set it in motion, but she won't admit it. I just blame that on the crack. I hate to say it, but whatever. All because I told her no, like my boyfriend's not going to keep giving you crack. He's not going to keep buying you, at the time, Coke 45. Like he's not going, or Old English 800, I think was the thing then.
Yeah, that's
and he's not going to keep like giving you money. Like at this point, I'm 16. I'm grown. Tell me what to do, So I'm paying the bills here. She had like this apartment that's based on your income. So I was like, I'm paying the bills, whatever. Just real, ghetto shit.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So when he said, just
I know it's a lot, right?
No, it is a lot. So I'm over here like, okay, all the questions. But so if you wouldn't have said no to your sister, one, why did you say no? Were you tired of her, or did you feel like you were feeding into her addiction? Like, why did you say no?
It was a bit of ego. It was a bit of wanting to. I thought that I was an adult because, again, my mom got sick. Before she passed, I ran her business. 15, running a hair salon. Knew everything. My mother, I think, groomed me to take over her business. So I was prepared. When you couple that with being a straight A student from kindergarten to 10th grade, like I was very book smart, but spent enough time in the summer where I was street smart, like, so nobody can tell me shit. And the adults that was around me, all y'all stupid as motherfucker. In my opinion, you're dumb. You don't know what's going on. And I thought that I was kind of taking control over my life. But I think in that moment I was grieving and just trying to assert myself and find my place. And my sister, oh my God, I don't know if she listened or not, but I don't, whatever. Like she want to talk, we can talk. But I think at that point, even now to this day, when she's drunk or high, like she's belligerent. And it was a matter of saying, like, in the words of Sheree Whitfield, who gonna check me, boo? Like, no, he's not, and I'm gonna leave and I'll be back.
Yeah.
It was like one of those things, like who's the woman of the house, when it was her house in the first place. But I just didn't know that. It was a lot going on. I don't know what exactly prompted me to like push back, but I did. And I'm not going to say it's backfired. To this day, I tell my father, him coming to get me saved my life.
Ooh, that was my second question. That was my second question. Like, what was the trajectory of that? Like when he said, pack your shit.
So my mother, evangelism missionary in the Church of God of Christ, non-denominational. I go from that extreme to my father being a Methodist reverend. It was a huge culture shock, one coming from Atlanta, then going to Maryland. That's a culture shock within itself because of my Southern drawl, my accent, how I dressed, like everything was different. Then going from being in the house where my mother had a lot of money and we kind of, it was just me and my younger brother. And to now it is me and my brother and then my 3 step sisters all in 1 bedroom. Like they had a 2-bedroom apartment. Wow. And I wasn't used, and I was out on my own, making my own money. I was dealing with drug dealers. So I'm like, I need my hair and nails done like every week. Like, what's the problem? Like what's the problem?
So you went from, kid, your mom gets sick, you project and move into adulthood really quickly back to being a teenager.
Yeah. And I'm like, what? Y'all broke? Like, what is happening? Like, you know what I mean? Like, ooh, rules? Like, what is this? So it was a huge adjustment. It was a lot. It was a huge adjustment. When he came to get me, I tried to run. Like my sister lived like on the 3rd floor. I'm looking out the window like, if I tie these sheets, you know, am I going to get out or whatever? And my brother was there. My oldest brother was there, and he was like, girl, just pack your stuff. So I like literally put my stuff in trash bags. I was not prepared. And I remember when we was driving, every time the car stopped at a light, I like open up. We were in a van. So I like open up the door and try to run. Like after the second time, my dad gave me a look like, try it if you want to. And I knew better. I'm like, let me just go ahead and take this ride, you know? So I went kicking and screaming. And I remember when we went to the high school there, my dad was just really pleading the case because they wanted me to do the 10th grade over again. My dad was like, no, you need to see her honors. I mean, it was just a lot. And they was like, the counselor was like, I'm going to put you in the 11th grade, but if you mess up, we're going to hold you back.
Oh, wow.
It took, for me at that point, I was so resentful that I worked my ass off so that I can go to a college far away from him. Like I wanted to get away. So I'm like, if I just continue this, take all the AP classes, get in all the extracurricular activities, I won't have to be at this house. I can kind of immerse myself in that. But my number one motivator for that was to get away from reality, to get away from my father. I didn't have a relationship with him. I didn't really have, I despised my stepmother based on the hatred that was passed down through me, covered as love from my mother. Therapy is my best friend. Like, I don't know where I would be without that. And thankfully, it was my father that introduced me to therapy. Because with all of that, like I said, I was working so hard in high school because I wanted to get away. Like I graduated with a 4.38 grade point average. Every school that I applied for, I was accepted into. I did not go to college because my dad wanted me to stay in the state of Maryland. And I wanted to go to Clark Atlanta. So he did everything for me not to come back to Georgia. And Clark Atlanta offered me a full scholarship. My dad said no. He was like, you should go to Bowie, the University of Maryland. I don't want to stay in Maryland. I worked my ass off to get the fuck away from you. And he did not fill out my FAFSA. And so he was like, if you want to be grown, you do it yourself. After some convincing, I finally applied for Cabrini College. It's a small white private school in Pennsylvania. And I really wanted to go. But by the time I convinced him to send my application in for housing, I missed the deadline. There was no housing. And they were going to have to pay out their pocket for me to go, which they could not afford to do. So I ended up not even going to college right away. You know, so therapy, that's all I'm saying. Because my life for me has not been a crystal stair.
So Southern girl, and you go and you move up to Maryland, and I heard you mention that even, you know, the way you talk, the Southern drawl, and the way you dress. So how do you feel about your body right now?
I've always been very petite and lean. I'm tall, you know, but I've always been small. I didn't gain necessarily weight until after I divorced. And that's when I guess the real battle with my weight. But even in high school and things, I always thought I was fat. I look at them pictures now, I'll be like, girl, you was tripping.
That's all we talk about on here. We're like, we were tripping.
But I would say as far as my body, I knew it was something because in Maryland, they have like this drum line after the games and stuff, and you get to come down, and I would just come down by myself. And that's when I began to notice like my body. I was like, oh yeah. Even the coaches and shit, I'm like, that's predatorial, but whatever. You know? Like, listen, you know, so I began to embrace it a little bit, but I was still very insecure about it. Fast forward, I have a kid at 19, and I was really bad with money. I found out I had bipolar, very impulsive, smoking a whole bunch of weed. So I needed to supplement my income. So I became a stripper. First off, that is not in my ministry because I was lazy. Okay, I'm not about to do all these flips and tricks and shit for $20. Like, I'm not gonna do that.
I'm so weak right now. You said it's not my ministry because I'm lazy.
because when I started seeing like the acrobatics and shit, I'm like, I'm not made for this. Like, and I was also working at the bank at the same time. So it would be funny. Sometimes I'll be at the bank, like next customer. And then at night, I'll see my customers at the strip club. But you would think like most people, like, I'm working my way through school or whatever. No, I was just mismanaging my funds. Like, whatever. I need to make these ends meet. So I was at that point became, more confident in my body and everything. I moved back to Georgia, got married, and the guy who I was married to made me he took my confidence from 100 to 0 just through a number of things. And one of those things was body shaming me, especially after I began to have children.
His
children. Yeah. We had 3 kids. I had 4 children. I had a daughter at 19. And then when I married at 23, I had 3 children when I was married with him. I was married for 10 years. He was like, oh yeah, it wasn't in an effort to show support. It wasn't very supportive at all. He just did not wrap it well because he's really into fitness and even to this day. But the way he was like, yeah, you need to go ahead and hit these crunches. And it was just like, yeah, I just had a baby. But now I look at, it's this picture of my youngest daughter. And afterwards I went to a friend's house and she took a picture. It was 6 weeks postpartum. When I say, if I can get just that body back, and I remember he made me feel as though I was so fat. You know what I mean? So I have an athletic build and you can't go by what's on the scale, but when I'm looking at my clothes and everything, like everything is tight and toned or whatever. But no, he made me feel so bad about my body. So the confidence that I did have, I lost in that marriage. And then when I divorced him, I was dating a guy who's a big guy, I'm fat, whatever. He's a big dude that always told me how beautiful I was, encouraged me to eat. I was gaining weight. He's like, oh, you're still beautiful to me. And when I say I packed on the pounds, I packed on the pounds. And I understand now it had a lot to do with my divorce and grieving and just all this trauma I had dealt with that was piling up. And I was showing the most ugliest part of myself to this man, and he accepted it all. That, a year's time, I gained 100 pounds.
Yeah.
100 pounds. And I've been struggling with my weight since.
And you know what? Aisha says it. Aisha is in season 3 as well. And she says they're men like that are magic stealers. They steal your magic. They see that 100% in that cup full, and they become like this succubus, and they steal your magic. Mm-hmm. And you have to fight really hard to realign yourself to get your magic back.
That's funny you said that, because what just came to mind is I was in this relationship with this guy who, gorgeous man, handsome guy, a complete narcissist that turned out to be physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually abusive and just damaging to me after years of what I thought was self-work. And I crumbled after. That was in 2018. And COVID actually helped me in terms of my body image, because 2019, I was still just going through a lot of things. And even now, today, I even thought about it, i.e. I had to block him and his new wife on Instagram. Not that they were looking at my shit. I kept looking at theirs, and I was like, if you don't block this shit. But every time it was a reminder, like every time I look, it's a reminder of some fucked up shit he would say to me. So after that relationship, I just crumbled. I was a hot mess. And then COVID hit. I was at home. I, ended this relationship with my best friend, i.e. a trauma bond, after 23 years. And I was just like, time for you to get your shit together. And I remember, I think it was February 2019, I want to say, I made a post. And it was like this sexy post. And I was just playing around. I was like, hashtag Operation Stepdad. And I was like applying my DMs. And when I say my DMs went off, I was like, oh, y'all looking, right? I was like, oh, okay then. So I started seeing like people were saying like, well, I thought she was in a relationship. And I guess because I wasn't putting myself out there, apparently there's a single look and I wasn't looking single or whatever. So that kind of started something. So, and when COVID hit, all of it's, people at home, they're communicating and talking and things more. I remember in my living room, my kids weren't here. I had like a new wig.
You are listening to the LaRae Infinity Let's Talk podcast. On July 17th, the WOMI app has paired together with the US Space to bring Melanin Minds Mental Health Conference and partnering with our very own All Real Radio right here in Houston, Texas. This hybrid holistic health conference is all about amplifying and bringing to light melanin mental health professionals and celebrating and uplifting our mental health in the melanin communities. For more information, visit melaninminds.org and make sure to follow Melanin Minds on Instagram at _Melanin Minds. That's _MELANINMINDS. Back to the listen. Enjoy.
I had a tripod in my cell phone, and I downloaded this app called Photo Timer that you could take like intervals, like 10 shots or whatever. And I got this sexy outfit, put on my longest lashes and red lips. And I just did this photo shoot. In the last photo shoot, as I'm drinking, I wasn't even drinking. I was on a juice cleanse, so it wasn't even alcohol in it. But I took a nude picture, and I love plants, behind my plants. I had a martini glass in one hand and my book in the other behind this plant. Mm-hmm. And ever since then, like, I've been on my sexy shit. Like, you're going to get this rose, this ass, this hairy booty, and everything. Like, this is what it is.
I love this.
This is it. I got alopecia. I posted with my bald head and everything. When I was in the barbershop, like, look, a bitch is bald. If you want to run your fingers through my hair, it's not going to happen. Like, this is me. I'm sick of trying to hide behind it. And I think when I started my podcast, that's where the liberation came. Like, all these things that I had suppressed, I just started to let it out. And a part of it, especially when I was getting this attention, one, I knew I liked the attention for the wrong reason. But two, I was like, yeah, bitch, you do look good. Mm-hmm. And I just started to embrace it. And then I started, like, when I get out my shower, I got a huge mirror in my bathroom. To this day, when I get out my shower, when I open, I stand and I look at myself. And I admire myself. Some days I don't like what I see. I'm like, girl, you play too much. And then some days I'm like, oh, this is good. So I already had my navel pierced. I got my nipples pierced. I started wearing them waist beads, them thigh beads, and all of that. And I said, I'm going to adorn this fat. And it's gonna look good.
Yeah. I love that. So body, kind of femininity, what was happening to you during COVID, and then you're moving into being a lady behind the mic, behind the plants and the martini glasses. Mm-hmm. So as you're doing that, as you're getting ready for behind the mic, as you're being as transparent as you are, and like I've talked about in a lot of episodes with a lot of the ladies that are my guests, it's therapy. Our podcasts are therapy, not just to our guests, but to ourselves. So what do you do to get ready to be behind the mic? How do you show up honestly to transfer your energy?
Oh, it's hard for me. I'm not going to even pretend. Like, even now I'm preparing for a new season and I have so many ideas about it. But I want to be my most authentic self. I can see the progression from when I first started. When I first started, I had very much so my corporate hat on. When I started the podcast, I was very much so that. I knew what to say, how to say it, how to just give, because I know office politics. So I was bringing office politics to the podcast. Some things transitioned with the podcast. And as I began to expand and tell my truth, I know one day I just was fed up. And I started talking about like arrogance and people who take you, like I got on the mic and I let it rip, like my rawest self. And that's when I started getting a lot of feedback. And I was like, oh, people just like, I guess they like you to just tell your truth or whatever. So that's when I began to lean in my truth, because I make a commitment to myself to not, I've learned the difference through this podcast between being honest, truthful, and transparent. And then with that, I've learned the difference of the different levels of transparency. So I'm like, damn, this shit is complicated. And I had to call my therapist, Dr. Oliver. I need to talk to you. And then I had to tell my psychiatrist, Dr. Gupta, baby, up the meds because I'm ready to tell the truth. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. That is beautiful, because you said there's a difference between being honest, transparent, and truthful. And there is. And there's levels to that shit. There's a lot of levels to it. And it's scary too. And it is, and I agree with you, because as I've moved through the podcast world, I like to think like I'm an honest, direct, transparent person. But the more and the more you lean into your truth and are comfortable with it, and then you go back and you listen to it. And then mine plays on the radio too. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, like I said that. But my goal is to be uncomfortable, to let somebody else know that they are not alone, for women to understand that our journeys aren't monolithic, but we go through a lot of stuff together, alone and separate. And something that you've touched over several things, and y'all, she's moving fast, so you need to listen to this episode 3 times. I'm giving you instructions now. But I'm getting you with, I got y'all with some of the questions, but I want to go back because you said bipolar, therapist, psychologist, wigs, and alopecia. You said all of that. Yeah. Let's talk.
All right. So after my mom passed, again, I grew up in an overly religious household. Like, we went to church for everything. I was going to therapy, but it was with the ministers. We'll talk about things, but everything ended up in prayer, which is fine. But it also ended up in tearing at the altar. And I'm just like, okay. So when I moved with my dad,
y'all, her face is in the die for. She's like, okay.
So when I moved with my dad, he began taking my younger brother and I to therapy. Talk therapy, and that was a new concept, a foreign concept. I wasn't very open to it. However, after I moved out of my father's household and I began to go through these extreme highs and lows, I was working at SunTrust Bank at the time as a manager, and I could not function without smoking weed. I smoke weed to wake up. I smoke weed to get through my day. I smoke weed to go to sleep. Like, it came to the point where I was smoking weed so much, it was like a cigarette. Like, I wasn't getting high. Like, it was just to keep me functional. And because of my family history of, crack and like strong, like drug addicts and strong alcoholics, I was afraid to try anything else because I have a very compulsive and addictive personality.
Same.
I was like, let me just go ahead and go to therapy. And once I was going through and describing everything, that's when I was diagnosed with bipolar. I was in this abusive relationship and it was crazy. Like, I was like, oh no. So I moved to Georgia and started therapy again, and I didn't go because they was trying to put me on medication for bipolar. And I just felt as though if I'm on medication, I'm admitting that I'm crazy, right? And I'm not crazy. Like, I'm smart. I graduated with honors. Like, I'm not crazy. But that's not bipolar at all. So I didn't take it. I had my second child and I went into postpartum depression, which triggered mania at the time that I didn't know. And that lasted for like a year or so. Nobody knew what was going on with me, to the point where I tried to commit suicide. I was in a psychiatric facility. Like, it was a lot, so I was like, okay. So eventually, again, post-divorce, that's when I really leaned into, let me get my mental health together and really embrace being bipolar, doing the research, going to therapy. Finally said, yes, give me some medication, because it was to the points where I would go into mania and be awake for 3 or 4 days. I remember the last time it happened, I was triggered by a previous boss who's currently my boss again. And he triggered me so bad that I was up and I painted my entire downstairs in like 3 days, and I just didn't sleep. And when the mania came down, like, it was a shitty ass job, but I couldn't stop, so I had to learn how to control all of that. And it just, I don't know, it's taken some time to really learn to do that. Hence the reason why I even went hiking yesterday. Like, I've just learned the different things that work versus what doesn't work. And then in terms of alopecia, my mom suffered from female balding. And by her being a hairdresser, it wasn't a thing. And this was, she started wearing sew-ins before sew-ins were a thing. You know, she was always on the up and up. She was featured at the Bronner Brothers studios. Like, we were well connected in the hair industry. I mean, in the Mecca in Atlanta, like, my mom was it. And she never really talked about it. Like, I knew, but we didn't talk about it. And as I began to get older, when I had my first daughter, my hair shed like so bad. And I thought it was associated with my pregnancy, where I just cut all my hair off really, really short. By the time I hit 35, that shit accelerated. Like, I'm like, what is this? So I went to a dermatologist, and he was like, oh, it's alopecia. And I'm like, okay, alopecia just means hair loss. So I let it go, and they was trying to do a biopsy. I'm like, what is that? And it was like, punch a hole or something in your scalp. Hell no, I'm not doing that. And then he was like, how they can stick needles in my hair. I'm like, I'm not doing that. So I was still in denial. And then I began to notice, like, the part that was dyed in the top just began to get real thin. So I always say I had like the George Jefferson. Like, all my hair around the back is really full. So if I could just flip my head, it would be good. But I can't. So, like, it began to get really thin across the top. And I began to just get a sew-in, even with a shortcut. And that began to add tension where I could no longer braid the hair. So I started to glue it. And then the spot was just getting bigger and bigger. So I went back to the dermatologist, and he was like, and at first it was during COVID. So he wanted to do a virtual. I don't want to do no virtual appointment. I need you to look at my hair. You know what I mean? And then when I log on, I see it's a white man. I'm like, this man is not going to know what I'm talking about. But when I say he broke it down, he was like, no weaves. And when I mean weaves, he was like, no sew-in, no glues, no. He was blanking it down. I was like, okay, so he did that.
Y'all should see my face, because I'm like, because you would probably like that, like, oh,
yes.
Why he reading me right now? Why he reading me?
He knew. He was like, if you're going to do a perm, you need to do a no-lie kitty perm. Like, he was breaking it down.
And I know I'm bouncing back to this, but being behind the mic, being who you are, and you're a solo podcaster, and it seems like it's just a really powerful part of your journey. Mm-hmm. What is your advice to, like, people that are on the fence about podcasting, or on the fence about being on podcasts, or on the fence about, like, really starting to live in your truth? Because we have a lot of people on the show that are entrepreneurs, and so, you know, they can be whatever, and that can be their brand. And we have some CEOs and people that are more corporate that stay a little bit more buttoned up and are honestly nervous about being on the podcast, and then nervous afterward about it coming out and people using that against them. So thinking of all of those things, like, where are you at with that, and what advice do you have for people?
I would say you have to examine your intention. Like, what is your true motive? Because if you're really wanting to tell your story and being your truth, it's not about the response you're going to get. That's even when I'm talking to people in my life, or trying to affirm or amend certain things. Like, and this is something I teach my children. You're not responsible for how someone reacts to you. You're only responsible for how you deliver it. So that's where my responsibility lies, is how I deliver this message. And I'm not in it to gain any particular response. I'm in it to release it from myself. I'm in it to have that conversation with the other person, again, creating a safe space for tough conversations. Because of me living throughout my truth, I find that people are more willing to tell the truth from me, because I always affirm in them that it's okay. And you're not alone. Brene Brown is one of my favorites. And if you all are not familiar with Brene Brown, she's a scientist that that studies hurt, vulnerability, and shame. And one of the key messages that she says is that people want to be seen. And for me, growing up, I was always taught that I was too sensitive. But as I've gone through therapy and my self-work, I know I'm impacted. So I feel people, I know energy, and I just have a gift of making people very comfortable to tell the most inner, deepest, darkest part of themselves. And they feel safe in doing that. So that's where my podcast lied. So for those of you that are in corporate America, if you're doing something and it doesn't authentically align with who you are and your core values, then don't do it. If you're ashamed of it, then don't do it.
Don't put yourself in a situation if you're not prepared, but also believe that when it's time, because sometimes we think we're not prepared and we're exactly ready. And that's something that I've learned. Like, I'm exactly ready for whatever is happening right now. I'm not ready. I'm exactly ready. And we all need to trust in the process and where we are, especially if we're in a state of being self-aware, not perfect, no, but like self-aware of who you are. Is there something from your past that you've witnessed or gone through that you really don't like to talk about even now?
I'm fairly an open book. It's only 2 topics that I just stay away. Not even topics, like very specific events. Well, I'm talking about the topics, but 2 very specific events that I don't talk about. One, I still haven't vocalized it to anyone. The second, I finally vocalized it to my partner, because we have this thing where, when we want to moments of intimacy, that we really search our hearts, minds, and deepest connections, and we tell each other our deepest, darkest secret that we've never told anyone. And we do those in small increments to create this level of trust and intimacy with each other, which I have a very hard time with. No matter what it is I say, I've realized I'm deathly afraid of it, like terrified of it. So one of those things I talked to him about, I'm not going to say here, but I do openly talk about like sexual trauma and molestation, but it's a very specific event that I don't talk about. And I shared that with him.
Wow.
So I only have 2. Everything else, I'm like, I'll tell that shit. I don't care. I have 2, and he was the first person I ever talked about it with. And I'm so thankful for him, because we've created this space that we tell each other things. And it's just like, he's like, thank you for sharing. How can I help? And it's like, whew, that's all you got to say about that? So it was good. It was good.
Let's say there's just one now, because you telling the person that needed to be told is knocking it out, right? Like, sometimes your truths aren't for everybody, and the ones that are, they'll be heard. The one thing that you're not talking about, when and if you do, who will it help? And do you feel like it's on the horizon, or it's just something that you prefer just leaving it where it's at?
I want to address it. There have been several opportunities for me to do so, but it is so deeply associated with shame, where I'm learning the difference between shame and guilt. And I'm very guilty. I feel very guilty about my actions. I understand why I did those things, but I know that in addition to what I did, it caused a lot of other pain and hurt to other people that I'm not prepared to deal with. I'm not prepared. Like, I'm not willing and ready to face the music with it, because I do believe if you're owning your truth, that you have to own all the consequences, good, bad, or indifferent. And that's just not one that I can't necessarily pinpoint as to why I'm not willing to accept the truth about it, but I know that I have to. And it may be that one thing that I take to the grave with me. I hope it's not, but I haven't developed the courage, because I'm still so deeply associated with shame. So what I'm doing to prepare for that truth, and hopefully I get there one day, is beginning to release shame and uncover shame in other instances. So that's why you see it show up in my podcast. But it's a lot of shit about me that needs correcting. And I'm not afraid to say, oh, let me tell you how I'm not shit and how I don't plan on changing that. And then there are things that I'm like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like how I showed up in that moment. And I begin to do the work. And some things is, I show up in ways and I don't realize how I'm impacting other people. And when they're telling me the truth about that, I have to own it. And it doesn't feel good all the time. It doesn't. So I'm learning to just lean into those moments and you talked about it earlier, like being uncomfortable. If I'm comfortable at any moment, it's time for me to shift. And that's a conversation I recently had at work. Like, I'm comfortable. You're no longer challenging me. You don't give me any assignment that scares me. It's time for me to move on.
Do you consider yourself a sexually enlightened person?
Yes, I get down with the get down. Very liberal, open. I try it all, do it all. And I'm so thankful for my partner now, because my most wildest shit, he be down for it. Yes, I'm very sexual for it. I feel as though I'm underexplored. I'm willing to try just about anything, but the more I venture out into things, I'm willing, like, okay, maybe not everything, but I look, bust it wide open and let's tell them bring it back.
Okay, so sexually enlightened. Okay, so this is my question, because when we were talking about things that you've seen or witnessed you don't like to talk about, you said there's 2, then we narrowed down to 1 because you and Boot thing, but you said like you do this in your middle of the right? So what is that connectivity level? Because let's talk about like a relationship and what it means, because you're not just saying relationship. You have said, because like if you listen for the first 40 minutes of the podcast, you say partner. So I don't know if you a lesy, if you non-binary, if you a straight, whatever it is, which is great, because I say partner, right? When I'm in something, a partnership. I laugh. I need to stop laughing. There's a boo out there. I may have met him already, but we'll see how that goes. But partnership, what does that mean to share a secret like that and then be able to be sexually connected? How does that intensify things?
Okay, this is what I'll say. A lot of the things that I'm into sexually takes a level of trust. It takes a level of communication that you have to be in sync there. So in order for us to explore in that realm, we look for opportunities outside of that bedroom to create pockets of intimacy, pockets of being able to say the truth, or we're not taking it personally. Because when you are doing something sexually, okay, pet peeve, I'm not willing to teach nobody this. I mean, if you're not willing to teach, how they gonna learn? You know what I mean? Like, it's different per person. So I have to teach you me in my body. I have to explore me in my body. And there are going to be things that we're going to explore together. So creating these pockets of intimacy and trust and truth, it will allow us to say, okay, I don't like that sexually. I'm not saying I don't like you. Right? So to get there, we have to learn how to do that outside of the bedroom, where I'm not taking things so personally. To say that is your experience, and I have to be willing to submit in that moment, and submit just overall, which submission is dominance, right? To say, okay, well, what can I do? So with me learning what to do, one, I'm giving you power to vocalize and feel you in the space. And now I feel empowered, because now I know that if I'm listening correctly, I can make you do shit that you never thought you was going to do. And the shit is so fucking mind-blowing. So mind-blowing.
Would you rather be crazy rich or deeply in love?
Deeply in love.
Talk about it.
When you're deeply in love with yourself first, it's going to allow you to create a life of ease. Right? When you're deeply in love, even with someone else, whatever that is, your career, right? Another person, there's a level of dedication, a level of passion, a level of long suffering that go along with those things that could potentially produce being rich. And then the other thing is you evaluating, what do you consider rich, right? So the PKME is what profits the man to gain the whole wide world and lose their soul, right? Monetarily, you have all these money. It's up to a certain dollar amount that money can buy you happiness, right? I do believe it can buy you happiness, but up to a certain dollar amount. And then anything outside of that is just your money projecting your misery if you're not truly happy or deeply in love.
What's been one of your biggest accomplishments thus far?
Navigating corporate America with a high school diploma. I'm still in college. Ain't never finished. Never finished. And to hold the positions that I held and this our success, a success that America tends to glorify, right? So being a leader in the corporate space, running many nonprofits, being on the board there, own multiple houses, drive the nicest of cars. Got a high school diploma. And I do that shit and do it with my eyes closed, honestly. So,
yeah, that's good. What's something that you're embracing about yourself? You've talked a lot about different things that have even happened since 2018, 19, 20. So you're like really hitting your stride. And we were just talking about this last week with Gabby. We're like, damn, it's like, the 20s, we thought we were the shit. And then you get in the 30s and you start hitting your stride. And then the 40s are the new 20s now. And your 20s, you're like, bitch, you. So what are you really embracing about yourself right now?
That I'm a wounded healer. And in order for, with me being so vocal about my journey and releasing a lot of the shame that I talked about and no longer being embarrassed, I call it the FUD factor: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I went into it FUD, F-U-D. It's the FUD factor. I'm fearful of telling the truth. I'm fearful how people are going to respond to it. I'm uncertain of sometimes exactly what that is. Right. Sometimes I'm tapping into different parts of me. I don't even fucking know. Like people ask me, I'm like, I don't know. But I give me some time to figure it out. And then, fighting the imposter syndrome and, self-worth, self-acceptance, all of those things. So the more I do that, I'm realizing the power of my truth. I'm not going to say always, but I learned probably 8-9 years ago that I'm a change agent. Anybody that allows me to, I can change. I'm going to change something about you. I work in learning and development, and that's one of my skill set, and it comes so easily to me. I'm going to change. I'm going to change you if you allow me to do it. And if I'm listening and tuned into my innate ability, I can do that. So I'm learning that I have the power of guiding people through their healing. But I'm a wounded healer and I'm healing too. And that's something that I'm embracing because there is a part of me that I feel as though that I need to be this fictitious whole that I have in my brain that I'll probably never assimilate to. But I'm thinking that I have to be in this particular space in order to guide people through their healing. And it's not true.
You don't.
It's not true. And I have to experience all of these things, which makes me more empathetic, which allows me to embrace my compassion, which allows me to be in a moment with someone and be able to say, I see you, I hear you, and I've been there before, so it makes me more relatable. I can relate to anybody, from the street to corporate. Like I can relate to anybody and I feel people deeply. Yeah. So I'm not going to lose sight of that because of my own mess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Empathy is magic. And I appreciate that because I'm empathetic and people were like, you're over emotional when I was younger as well. And then the older I get, and then it was my enemy, right? My emotions were my enemy until I figured out that I'm an empath and what that means and how you move through that. And I really appreciate just the way you describe the wounded healer and what that means, because you do not have to be perfect to help people heal. There's not a book, a simple book on how to be a human. And if we keep judging everybody, that's how we get the people that are pomp and circumstance and keeping up with the Joneses and the Jeffersons and all of these things. And there's no authenticity. But if you could just be who you are, who you're growing into, at any given moment, it's just a better world and path to be in, and I love that. So who inspires you?
I don't think I have one particular person or one specific things. I think it's just like a gumbo of things. I think the most inspiring thing for me is to just be a better person, and like I'm most inspired to be my best self. My 15-year-old recently inspired me because I was accusing her of some shit and I had made that shit to be true in my brain. And she was at work and I text her, petty, a bad human moment. I'm not going to see a mom moment. In the way that she checked me, I had to congratulate her and let her know how proud I was. She was like, I told you this. It's not true. I don't know what else to convince you. And this is that, da, da, da. And then she hit me with, I love you. Have a great day. I'll see you later. I said, well, damn. That inspires me.
Who do you hope to inspire?
Everybody who the world says that they're not, like, can't. Because if you look at me on paper, I'm not supposed to have half of the shit, if any of it. But I do. That's who I want to inspire. The people that have been told no. And I always tell people, you can't tell me no. No don't mean N-O. No is K-N-O-W. You just don't know how I'm a value. You don't know me. You just don't know. You know what I mean? So that's who I hope to inspire. The people that's heard the no's. Again, going back to being change agent, to change the way that you understand no.
Y'all, we're in season 3, the ladies behind the mic, and there's just power out there floating in the world. And I am just so proud to be able to sit on the mic across from you. Thank you for being on Let's Talk. Y'all, if you didn't catch it again, you're going to have to listen to this episode at least 3 times. Before we hop off the mic, I want you to tell everybody about your podcast.
Okay, so first off, thank you so much for allowing me to come onto your platform. This has been amazing. Let me tell you, I was tired, okay? And I was like, oh my God, let me get myself together. But you have really re-energized me. Now I can feel like I'm going to do some stuff. So thank you. This is very therapeutic and cathartic for me. So thank you so much for that.
I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you.
Absolutely. I got some stuff off I ain't talked about. I was like, okay, check. So thank you. But my name is Kira, host, mom, and creator of Moms and Martinis. That is a podcast that really brings you into the kitchen table talk that I share with my friends. My tagline is creating a safe space for tough conversation. However, the podcast is not just for moms. It just happened to be I'm a mom drinking a martini, which today I'm drinking a little red wine. But I'm on Twitter, Facebook at Moms and Martinis, and on Instagram at Moms and Martinis Pod.
Kira, thank you again. Y'all, you know how this goes. Is you're learning yourself, is you're moving through the world as we enter into hot girl summer hurricane season. Remember that there's a lot going on in the world. You are not the only one. You are not alone. It is always worth having just a moment to look somebody in the eyes and see what's going on with them and ask somebody how they are doing. And as always, tell your story, be your own brand, live your truth, and stand in your moment.
All right, y'all, my name is Kira. I'm 40 years old, and I hope that y'all have learned something new and interesting about yourselves through me telling my truth unapologetically and without hurt, shame, or guilt. You've listened to my story as I live my truth, stand in my moment on LaRae, Affinity Let's Talk Podcast, Season 3, Episode 11.
Woo! Y'all, thank you. I appreciate you. All right, y'all. Bye.
Let's talk.
Beep. But yesterday, again, my ass went hiking. Just trying to get it together, and I'm sore. In the words of people in Atlanta, as my granny would say, I'm tired. Okay, I'm tired. Beep.
But shout out the doctor. Shout out your doctor, girl.
I don't even remember his name. Hey, boo. I know my psychiatrist that give me my meds. I know her name. That's Beep. I have never. Let me shut up because. Ooh.
Like that. Y'all miss what she said.
Hey boo, hey. Like, oh my God, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Let's talk.